Hey there, friends. This is Bill MacDonald, the virtual writing doctor, here to help you with expository. Welcome to lesson 3 of 20. For those of you who have signed up for that, it is on expository explaining in both essay and regular expository persuasive format. Part 2 goes into editing, part 3 revising, and the last part, part 4, will be over reading. And I'll try to cover as many objectives that students are struggling with as possible. But let's get started on lesson 3. We've already talked about how to get a 0. The two main ones are if you have kids write on a computer or on a piece of paper and their writing is indecipherable I or illegible I, or you give them a topic and their idea has nothing to do with the topic, then the two people who are going to look at that paper are going to give it zeros. Now, outside of Texas, you might just have one person grading because they're trying to save money, but people have to understand that all grading of open-ended writing, whether it's typed or written and on a paper with a pencil, the grading is going to always be subjective. So the good thing about Texas, and might be different than some of you guys, is if the scoring is adjacent, if I give the paper a 1 and you give it a 2, then all they do is add those two scores together and the student gets 3 points on the expository. Now, in the essay for reading that's going to be coming up next year, you can get 1 point for organizing correctly, answering the question, a second point for showing where in the passage that you find the answer, and a third point for developing and explaining your answer. But what we're going to focus on today is how to get to a 3. The 1 is just give me your idea and give me some reasons. So a 0-1 paper would be a central idea in 4th grade, a controlling idea up to 7th grade. 8th and 9th, would you call it a thesis, and 10th grade and 11th and 12th, you might be working on persuasive, you would call it a position. So you take one position and then you give your reader reasons why. So what I want to do is share my screen with you and just remind those of you from Texas, on page 416 of my binder, I have about 20 pages of expository prompts. And so there should always be, I think in every state, if you're going to teach expository, the word expository should be written at the top to remind your kids of the first 3 letters that you're going to explain something. Whether you're kinder all the way to 10th grade, 11th grade, whatever grade level, if you're doing expository, make sure the purpose called expository is written at the top. Now in Texas, just want you guys outside of Texas to see, even though you don't have this, what they do is prep the students with a read section and a think section, and then they have the kids look at section 3 to look at the topic, and they have 5 bullets. It's basically a student checklist. How to get a 1, basically have a central idea about the topic. How to get a 2, organize with reasons why and examples. How to get it to a 3, develop. How to get a 4, which our next video will be, choose your words carefully, because basically the development rubric in Texas says to develop your essay with voice. But what we're going to try to do is, how do I take a 2 quality paper and turn it into 3? How do I develop? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you to page 455 of the binder. Some kids need differentiated instruction. And so if you play red light, green light, most kids can relate to a traffic light. And in a In an essay that's expository or persuasive, everything in the essay has to tie together. The red light would be the topic. The yellow light would be the idea, the central idea, the controlling idea, the position or the thesis, and the green light to turn it green, greener and greenest. You would take an example or an experience, either your own or someone else's or historical event, explain it by developing, that's what we're going to work on today. The next lesson will be exploding it with higher vocabulary, making sure you have a proper ending or a conclusion, 2 or 3 sentences that bring closure, and then make sure you take your paper to the ER, the editing and revising room, editing, fixing the conventions, revising, fixing the content. So if we look at page 456, then you can use a human body, differentiating your instruction. And if you're one of those teachers in some part of the US where you're transitioning and you're having to do dual language, I went ahead and put the left side in Spanish and the right side in English so your kids could understand as they're transitioning, because in Texas up to 5th grade, kids can do their subjects in English or Spanish. And so some of you might look at page 456 of the binder, but the one I want to talk about today is the hand. We all have a hand, so let's give ourselves a hand for having a hand. I call it explaining, expository, and persuasive using WWEE, my fingers and my toes. Right now, because we're only trying to get to a 3, we're only going to focus on our finger. All right. Now, remember, think of the red light as the topic. What is the topic? The purpose is going to be expository or persuasive. So your students would circle one of those areas. They would circle expository or persuasive. Are we trying to explain? Then we need this ending. If we're trying to persuade or convince or be argumentative, not the negative argumentative, but persuade in the argumentative way, we want a call to action. So the ending is going to have to sound a little bit different if you're trying to get 3s and 4s in persuasive. So if you look down here, once you understand, you think of this little section here as the red light, and your introduction, you want to try and get a 3. What other words can you use besides the exact words of the prompt, the topic? What other way could I start instead of starting the same way as everybody else? Another wow. What original way can I start? Because there's a million ways that you can start an essay. As long as you're addressing the topic, you don't have to start by asking a question about the topic. That's a worn out idea, and too many students do that. And so you're going to think to yourself, what original way could I start? And one of my close friends out there, who's now an assistant principal here in the Rio Grande Valley, has her kids start with words of wisdom. What truism or what quote, what saying could I either start with my head or end with my feet? And she would get about 75% of her kids to get 3s and 4s. And for those of you not from Texas, a 3 is sort of like in the 80s, 80 to 89 would be maybe what you might call a B in letter grades. A 4 would be a 90 to 100. And a 2 would be a 70 to a 79, maybe a C quality paper. So wherever you're from, if I say how to turn a 2 into a 3, it'll be basically saying, how do I turn a C quality paper into a B quality? How do I turn a 70-ish paper into an 80-ish paper? By the way that I explain. So coming back, we need a clear central idea statement. If you're a lower grade, lower elementary teacher, if you're middle school, You might call it a controlling idea statement. That way they can kind of graduate. They all mean the same thing. It's just that they call them in different terms depending on the grade level that we're tackling. In high school, they'll tend to call it a thesis statement. But remember, the difference is in expository, I'm just explaining, and persuasive, I'm trying to convince you to believe like me and do something different about your life because of it. Now, notice on the first finger, we have a left thumb. We'll call that reason why, the blue thumb. If you have another thumb, we'll call that the green thumb, reason two, or example two. Now, I'm gonna take a closer look here so that you can see the tops of the fingers so that we can see it's called explaining, explain. So there's a corny little picture of a plane there. And to review, for those of you that have already seen lesson 1 and lesson 2, if you get a 0, it's because you wrote about nothing to do with the topic. If you got a 0, it's possibly because your writing was I indecipherable or I illegible. They couldn't understand what you wrote about. If you got a 1, then a 0-1 paper would be you saying, I'm going to give you my idea and possibly some reasons or examples. That would be like a 0-1. Now, the problem with Texas is if one person says 0, that it's unscorable, and another person gives it a 1, they have to throw those two scores out because one person can't say it's unscorable and one person gives it a score. So unless it's 2 zeros or 2 1s, in Texas at least, then you have to grade it over again. So if we look at the next part, I said a 1-2 paper is don't forget to organize correctly. What they're going to look for on expository is, are you giving reasons? This is the organizational part right here. And let me highlight, kind of point to it here. In order to get to two land, you want to give reasons why and examples. Now, what I've noticed is too many students are giving lots of reasons, lots of thumbs, or they're giving way too many examples. They say, oh, my teacher is nice. And they give lots of examples of nice, but never explain any of them. So what you want to do is say, what, second finger here, what real life example could I give? And the topic that we're going to pick today is a 4th grade topic that asked students, write about your favorite teacher. That's a who. So typically elementary topics are based on the 5 W's: who, what, when, where, and why. Who would be a person, why would be a reason you chose an idea, reason for an idea, when would be some sort of time idea, where would be a place idea, and what would be just a thing idea. So we're on to make sure your kids can get a 1-2-ish, make sure that they have reasons and or examples. In the upper elementary, secondary, you could give hypothetical examples. There's something that could happen, but it didn't really happen. You might call that realistic. In upper middle school and high school, you might use a current event example from a book, a magazine, a newspaper, a song, a video that you saw. Historical would be before you were born, some example that you want to use to explain your reasons and your idea. Now, once you've done that part, given your reason and your example, why and example, a reason, if you look at this next part right here, the middle finger, the tallest finger, how to get what we call a 3, how to get in the 80s, or what you might call in your state a B, make sure they're explaining by taking something that's vague, an example, and making it more specific. So you would zoom in and say, okay, I'm gonna look at that, and you see the two colors there. I'm gonna use that example there as your blue example. Explain that one by telling me a little bit more about the what and the why. The if you look here, all of these little stars, if you want to be a star student and get 3s, which don't happen very often in Texas, then tell me a little bit about which, who, and where, and when, and how. And that's what we want to do to get to 80 to 89 a B quality paper. And so if you're going to give me 2 examples, then I need you to explain both of them. If you're going to give me 3 examples, then I would say, okay, we'll use the red here as your, your first example, your blue one. Oh, let me go ahead and color code so that way we can kind of coordinate here. We'll call your first reason an example. Oh, I guess it just wants to come up. One color. That's disappointing. I'll go ahead. Let me see if I can change the color. Nope, it doesn't let me. So what we'll do is we will just make little check marks. So right here, got my blue. If you're gonna just give me one example or reason, explain that example using what I call the 6+1 W's: who, what, when, where, which, why, and how. If you can do that, the closer you can get to your grade level, the better chance you have of doing well. So for example, if this is your reason, we'll call that kinder. If you give me an example, we'll call that first. If you can explain it with at least one sentence, we'll call that second grade level. If you can explain it with 2 sentences, third grade level. You can explain it with 4 sentences or more, then we'll call that 4th grade. That's why I call it my grade or more. And so if you're a 7th grader, then give me 7 sentences. My grade or more will get a good score. And there's no magic number, but I'm just saying is, what I'm saying is, for each reason or example that you give, you want to try and spend as many sentences as you can, anywhere between your grade, we'll say 4th grade students, up to your age. 4th grade, 4 sentences, up to my age. I'm 10 years old when I finish 4th grade. So anywhere between 4 to 10 sentences, that's called development. If I'm a 7th grader, if I can spend 7 sentences supporting that reason, that's what they call development. Develop your ideas, explain using what I'm going to call the 6+1 W's. Okay. Now, in the next video, we'll look at how to take a paper that's a 3, an 80 something, or a B, and turn it into a 4, a 90 something, or an A, by exploding with voice and vocabulary, what I'm going to call a heart and a head connection. And what I like about that 4th finger is your ring finger is there. So we're going to keep that reader engaged. And just so you know that in Texas, if you're a teacher, they have development with voice in the same rubric. And if you're a teacher of reading, you don't really have to worry about that because uh, they're not going to ask you for voice uh, in the essay responses, but they are going to ask you to develop. And so everyone should be saying where you got your answer, give an example from the text, and then if you're trying to get the 3 for the development, then explain with these W's that you have right here. So let me come out for a second and remind you. So what we're going to say is, I've got my central idea, my controlling idea, my thesis for expository. I'm going to give you a reason or 2 reasons why I chose the ideas. And for each reason that I give you why I chose it, I want to give you an example, or examples, 1 or 2 examples to explain the reason. And sometimes it's hard to understand that unless we can actually see something in writing. So I'm going to take something that a student wrote this past year about his or her favorite teacher, and we'll kind of analyze it to see where are the reasons, where are the examples. It's a paper that got a 2 in Texas, which would be 70 to a 79 if you want to give a number. It would be like a C if you want to give it a grade. So let's take a look, shall we, at an essay from Texas, okay? And for those of you who have the binder, what I'm about to do live, I've done in the binder for 16 essays for elementary and 16 for secondary, asking the right questions. So the prompt, the topic was, write about one teacher that you admire, one person you look up to. So of the 5 W's, who, what, when, where, why, that's a who, a person. So here we go. If we think of red as the topic, yellow is going to be the idea. So I'll get my yellow and I see it right there. The best teacher I know would be my math teacher, AKA Mrs. White. And so that we don't disclose who the teacher really was, in Texas, they take away the name of the person to protect the privacy of the student. Now, the necklace, the transition to the body, the moving to my thumb is going to be called the transition. So the transition that the student uses is, we'll call that reason number 1. The reason why she is the best teacher is, at least they didn't say the first reason, but you can see in a moment they're going to say the second reason, is that she encourages her students like me. So that's the reason. So what they were supposed to do is say, okay, if that's your reason, give me an example of a way that she encourages you. But this student was taught a formulaic approach, which says, before you give your reasons separately, tell the reader as a form of your necklace what's called a preview statement. The second reason, and I'll change the color to green because that's what we use. The second reason why is because she makes learning fun. Now, you may or may not believe me, but I just want you to know that you don't have to tell the reader what you're going to tell them before you tell them. The reason that that hurts the quality of the paper is because it's repetitious. So if you have 5 sentences and 3 of them say the same thing, then you really only have 2 good sentences. So You might not believe me, so I'm going to show you what the state of Texas told this group of teachers in Texas, the reason why they gave it a 2. And just so you know, that in elementary, a 2 from one person means that 2 different people gave it a 2, and so it got a 4. And just so you can compare your state to ours, 75% of the students in Texas, in fact, 80% this past year, got 2 2s, a 2 and a 1, a 1 and a 1, or 2 zeros. 80%. So what does that say? That whatever programs we're using to teach expository, at least in Texas, are not working, because my company in Texas is called May the Fours Be With You. How to get 2 4s. I'm not called May the 2s be with you. I don't want to just get to 2 land. I want to make sure I work with you and your students. If you're still showing kids how to explain how to go from 2 land to 3 land for this next month or 2, and how to go from 3 land to 4 land over the next 2 months after that. So let's make sure, because these are teachers that I'm talking to here. In this response, the writer offers the central idea that Mrs. White is the best teacher because she encourages her students and makes learning fun. Formulaic transitions. So they said it right there. In the rubric, if it's formulaic, where you're having to do, if everybody has to do a preview statement before they give their reasons, that's not an original approach to writing. So you don't have to have what I'm going to call a necklace where all of our necklaces look the same, where we all have to say our reasons, then we state our reason number 1 again and our reason number 2. So we would erase that, we would remove that repetition and just start with our reason down here. So I would remove that preview statement. My first reason why she's the best teacher is that she encourages her students like me. So once we've erased, let me go ahead and make the lines a little bit thicker. Okay, the reason, so if we pretended like we erased, oops, I'm using the mouse, let me clear my drawings there. Supposed to be drawing in blue. There it is. The reason why she's the best teacher is because she encourages her students like me. I'm sorry, I'm just drawing freehand here. I could use the straight line, I suppose, but now, if I erase that next sentence and just start explaining, that takes away a little bit of the formula. What's the example? She encourages me by telling me to try again when I want to give up on a problem. Okay? Now, there's the reason. She tells me not to give up when I want to give up on a problem. So there's only 3 details about that first reason. So what you would want to do is say, give me an example of a problem. Which operation do you struggle with a lot? Addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. I don't want you to do all 4 when I'm struggling with a problem. Many kids struggle with multiplications and division. Multiplication times product, division, quotient, divide, remainder. You take a numerator and divide it by the denominator. And so if you zoom in on just multiplication or division, not both, because if you're going to give me 2 examples, multiplication and division, then I would want you to explain both multiplication and division. Think about this. The first two letters of expository are E and X. Take your example. Just give me lots of examples if you want to get a 2. But if you want to get a 3, EXP, make sure you explain. For every single example you give me, explain it. So when I want to give up on a problem, I need you to take that vague idea, giving up on a problem, and make it specific. We'll call it GPS like I do in my writing folder. Get pretty specific. So which operation? So I would ask lots of the right questions. Who, what, when, where, which, why, how. Which operation do you struggle with the most? Oh, I really have a hard time with multiplication tables. Okay. Why? Well, I haven't learned multiplications. They just don't stay in my head. And she encouraged me. Well, how? So if this is why, then how does she encourage you? If you're going to say that she's the teacher, then I need to know how she encourages me not to give up. Since multiplication involves many steps, for each step that we do correctly, she gives us like a little piece of a Smartie. We get one package of a Smartie, and for each step of multiplying in the ones place by the number on the top, and the tens place and the numbers on the top, and putting the 0 down below, and all of those different steps involved with multiplication, then for each step that she gives us a little Smartie. Or you can say she gives out stickers, or maybe there's dum-dums, those little candies called dum-dums. And let's say it has 3 steps. If we get all 3 steps correctly, she writes something on our paper and encourages us. If we make a mistake, as long as we're trying, she says, I'm going to give you points for just showing your work. I can see that you at least tried to do the work. And so sometimes encouragement is giving me partial credit. So I've just got to know what you mean by encouraging, because we're talking about the teacher, and not to give up. Many students want to give up with math because there's multi-steps. The problem with word problems are the words and the problems. So you could talk about word problems, but you've got to pick an idea. Operations of multiplications when it comes to word problems. And so you would want to ask them, when is it that you have trouble on the multiplication? Well, I usually have trouble when it's the second digit, the one in the tens place that's on the second row. And so, well, how does she encourage you? Remember, you got to keep tying everything together. The idea, Mrs. White, with the reason that she encourages, the example on math problems. So how does she encourage you? And so all of a sudden, that 2, that 70 something, that C could turn into a 2 plus, a high 70, close to an 80, as long as they're trying to explain. Now, if I'm not trying to get a 4, I'm just trying to get a 3, then all of a sudden I would have to make sure I have an ending or a conclusion. You don't want to just say, and that's why Mrs. White is my favorite teacher. So if we were to clear the drawing and take a look, what did the student use to end the essay? Let's see, I'm going to skip the other reason. That is all of the reasons why my math teacher, AKA Mrs. White, is the best teacher I know. Now, if you remember, my pinky had a picture of dessert on it. I want dessert ending. Since they already wrote those things, those are the reasons. That's a sock that too many students would use when they write. Why am my math teacher a chemist? That was already restated. The best teacher I know, that was already restated. So what we would call that is leftovers. And so the reason, one of the reasons, the many reasons this paper stayed a 2, a 70, a C is because of the repetitious ending. I would have said, write something different. If she's the best teacher, then remove the word best and replace it, rephrase it. How can you, what other way could you end? What other words? If you're saying that she's the best, you're using the topic, the prompt. She's the most amazing, patient teacher with her patience, her math patience that I've ever seen. That would be an opinion. And if you want to make a heart ending to help you a little bit, I'm so delighted. I'm so excited. I'm so happy that I'm in her class. Heart and head ending. How are my feelings better because of her? What is my opinion of her as a math teacher? Thinking of that acronym, what other words? What heart and what head ending could I use to not just restate and repeat the ending? So lots to digest for you elementary teachers, but remember that little saying, my grade or more will get a good score. Adding my age could get me a 4. That's one way. So that means a second grader is 7 years old. So hopefully that second grader could have 2 sentences at the beginning and 2 sentences at the end. That's 4. And at least 3 sentences explaining one reason. A third grader, maybe 2 sentences at the beginning, 2 sentences at the end. 2 plus 2 is 4. And so a third grader is about 8. So maybe they could say, for my reason, I am 4 minus 4, I would need 4 sentences. 1, 2, 3, 4. I would want to be able to explain a reason, an example with at least one or two sentences. In 4th grade, my grade or more, I'm a 4th grader. I'm 10 years old. I could have anywhere from 4 to 10 sentences. And again, even though writing is subjective, you're at least going to get a 2 or 3 if you can find that example. And we'll call, just for the sake of color coding, because you can find lots of things that are blue and green out there. If yellow is going to be your introduction, blue can be your first reason, like in the hand that I showed you. Green can be the second one. And then you might have look for orange or purple things out there to represent reason number 3 and reason number 4. Now, there's no magical number needed for expository. So what's happening is too many programs are telling you to tell your students, you need to have 3 reasons. No, that's formulaic. Just develop. If you give me 3 reasons, you have to explain all of them. If you give me 2 reasons, explain both of them. If you give me 1 reason, explain it well. Because the longer you can stay on each reason with an example that you explain, the better chance you have of getting a higher score. So may the 4s be with you in Texas, and that's the right prescription in all the other 49 states and across the world, how to explain expository using your fingers and the colors of the traffic light, and in some cases today, your body, how to move to a 3. If you are part of the 20 lessons in 20 days for $20 and you teach secondary, as in 5th, 6th, 7th, or 8th grade, or high school, 9th, 10th, 11th, or 12th, make sure you email me and I'll show you how to get a 3 in junior high and middle school and how to get a 3 in high school. Take care. Good luck. God bless. And because we were talking about how to get 3s, may the 3s be with you and also with me. Take care. God bless.